So listen, you're getting outgunned, outclassed, and outplayed. But it's not your fault. It's your gun build. You see this right here? Yeah, this is not it. This is just suffering. But we're gonna fix that. This is your all-in-one gun build guide for Delta Force. And it doesn't matter what kind of build you're going for. Whether that's zero recoil, hip fire, or a lightning fast ADS build. All of these rules I'm about to give you, they apply to everything. After watching this video, you'll actually understand what goes into making a great gun build. So instead of copying random gun builds you found on YouTube, you'll actually be able to make the builds yourself. Now that sounds much better. There's two main components of building a great gun. One is your stats and keeping them balanced, and the other is the attachments you use in order to achieve that, as well as the type of gun build you're trying to make. And when it comes to your attachments, we can break that down into a further 5 parts. Your barrel, stock, foregrip, muzzle, and your rear grip. But before we dive into the attachments, let's have a look at the stats of this weapon. Here we can see the 6 primary stats of our gun. Although we can just use this as a guide, it's not particularly in depth. So if we press the details button, we can see all of the subsections of each stat, which are damage, control, handling, stability, and accuracy. Starting with the damage tab, it just contains information about your damage fall-off multiplier, also known as range. And that's it. Control is the most important tab we're going to be looking at today. If we look to the side of the tab, we can see a graph showing the recoil pattern of our weapon. By looking at this, we can see how much horizontal and vertical recoil reduction we need to be applying when making our build. In most cases, you'll find that applying both horizontal and vertical is most optimal, but more on that later. Although handling is usually just referred to as your ADS speed, it governs how fast you do just about anything with the gun. So in addition to your ADS speed, it also includes movement speed, sprint to fire delay, and reload, to name a few. Your stability is your second most important stat. It includes things like how much you sway when you're aiming down sights, the effectiveness of holding your breath on your recoil, as well as how long you can hold your breath for, and the stability of your lens, which I think is pretty overlooked. Accuracy is the final stat. By accuracy, it just means hip-fire accuracy and the radius of the bullet spread. If you're making a hip-fire build, this is the stat you want to pay attention to. Understanding what all of your stats mean are crucial when it comes to building a gun, and now that you do, let's get into the fun bit. Attachment time. Jumping straight in, we're going to start with a barrel. Every gun has around 2 to 5 barrels to choose from, and your choice plays a major role deciding what kind of build you're going for. Longer gun barrels favour range, control, and stability, while taking a hit to your accuracy and handling, and the opposite for shorter barrels. Unless you're making a hip-fire build, the longer barrel is almost always the best option. This is because you can easily just offset the lost handling, and accuracy generally isn't very important. And if your gun has multiple long barrel options, you can easily just choose which one's most appropriate based on the type of build you're going for. Next up, the foregrip and the muzzle. Do you remember that graph on the control tab? This is where that comes into play. We're going to be targeting both the horizontal and vertical recoil of our weapon. For your foregrip, these are the 3 best ones you should use. The Secret Order bevel foregrip, the Resonant Ergonomic grip, and the X25U Angled Combat grip. What these 3 grips have over other grips is the fact that they aid specifically within horizontal or vertical recoil instead of just a general boost to control. And I think the Secret Order bevel is usually the best choice. This is because generally horizontal recoil is far more difficult to control compared to your vertical recoil. And we can still deal with the vertical recoil by using a compensator. The rule I like to use is whichever direction of recoil is worse on your weapon is the one where I'm going to put the grip for it. Do it this way around because we can use calibrations on the grip but not the muzzle, so we can get more control out of the grip. Although you'd think the X25 would be a better option, I'll explain why it's not. If we look here at the effects of both of these grips, we can see that in addition to horizontal and vertical recoil, it also offers stability and camera stability. If you remember the firing stability and the lens firing stability from the stats section, this is what I'm talking about. I emphasize this just because of how much of an effect these 2 stats actually give to your gun. And the X25U lacks this effect, so it's only really going to work if your gun is already really stable. For example, you can see here I was able to make it work on an SG. Also, as a side note, if you don't have these grips unlocked, you can always use a K1 Elite bevel or an RKO as replacements while you level up your gun. And in my opinion, I don't think you should be using any other grips than the one I've mentioned here. They're just far too effective, and you can negate any of the nerfs it brings. The only exception to this is maybe making a hipfire build, but you could still use an X25U, as it has a boost to your accuracy, and you shouldn't neglect control when making a hipfire build. And for your muzzle, other than the 2 compensators I mentioned, here's some other ones that could work. The SMG Echo Suppressor, the Whisper Tactical Suppressor, the M7 Practical Suppressor, the Advanced Multi-Caliber Suppressor, the PBS Russian Suppressor, and the AK Bravefire Suppressor. Yeah, they're all suppressors. Okay, next we're moving on to the rear grip. Now I honestly think you could make a case for any of the grips that are in the game. They're all pretty solid and they all have their own use case scenarios. But there are two grips that outshine the others, and that is the AR Heavy Tar grip and the Scorpio grip. What I specifically love about the AR Heavy Tar grip is the fact you can put a base on it, either a balanced one or a stable one. A balanced one is great because it offers absolutely no negatives to your gun. As the name suggests, it pretty much boosts every stat, so you can't really go wrong with it. That being said, I do prefer the stable one just because of the amount of stability it actually gives you. And stability is king if you want your gun to feel smooth. It does have a pretty significant nerf to your handling, so you will have to make sure you're offsetting that. So if you're going to use a stable base, do be aware of that. And the Scorpio grip is great just because of the control. I mentioned this one over other control grips just because it gives the biggest boost. I'm also going to include the Invasion grip in here because it's a great hybrid between control and handling, and not every gun has a Scorpio grip. But if you do use it, make sure you are mindful of your stability. And you should be even more mindful if you're going to use something like a skeleton grip. But I don't really recommend that one, as there's much better ways of getting your handling high. And if your gun doesn't have the normal grip options and instead just has like a light or heavy grip, I would say I pretty much always recommend the heavy one, but you cannot easily make a light one work if you have the right attachments to go along with it. The stock is the last of the major attachments. Now there are a few stocks I specifically like, but it's extremely context dependent on your weapon's stats. For instance, I might say the Invasion Core or the Spec Ops is a really good stock, but say if you're already using, the longest barrel and like an AK Heavy Tar with a stable base on it, especially on something like an assault rifle, you might find that your handling is just far too low at that point. And though it may be really stable and fire great, it's not going to be practical at all. But again, that really depends on what the weapon's actually like. I think maybe I wouldn't want my handling dropping somewhere around 45, 40. Just because the gun's going to be far too clunky at that point. So you really want to just be carefully choosing your stock based on your stats and the kind of build you want to go for. And this is a general rule of thumb, should work. But if you want to go more in depth, there is some nuance to it. For example, the Cordonal stable stock in the Invasion Core may seem to have the exact same boost to control and theoretically should be the same, but they're not. If you look closely at the Invasion Core, you'll see it's a boost to control, and if you look at the Cordonal stock, you'll see it's a boost to firing stability, which is one of the subsections of control. Each stock has slightly different calibrations. One might boost your ADS speed and one might boost your control, and another may boost your ADS movement speed. And finally, there are a lot of weapon-specific stocks. The Russian guns in general have a lot of exclusive attachments, and most of them are stocks. You shouldn't ignore a lot of these exclusive attachments because a lot of the time they can be really good. A lot of them that you have very slight different fine-tunings to the balance of your stats on the weapon. And the AK-19 stock, for example, allows you to boost your firing stability and is a really good stock overall. And this isn't just for the Russian weapons. The M4 stable stock, for example, allows you to put a cheek pad on there, which allows you to have 2 stock calibrations. Also, on the note of stats, the stock is one of the major attachments where you're going to be trying to offset your stats here from other attachments. Also, don't be afraid to experiment. If you find a stock you really like, but it isn't working stat-wise with your weapon, you can always swap out a different attachment. Do some trial and error and see if you can get it to work or not. Also, pro tip, if you're trying to increase your handling, you should use the Sniper Skeleton stock because it has a massive boost to your handling and your stability. And as long as you can account for the lost control, which is a very small amount, this attachment is fantastic. Now before we go on to the next section, there's a few more attachments I need to touch on, which is your mags, your patches, and your optics. Whether you use an extended mag or not is really down to whether your weapon can handle it and whether you actually want to use one or not, and whether or not your gun itself actually needs one too. For example, the AKM doesn't really need one. In this instance, it's going to be way harder to run an extended mag without absolutely screwing over my handling. But on the flip side, guns like the Vector really do need one. Due to the nature of its rate of fire and its mag size, it really demands that you use the balls mag. So as long as you're working within the capabilities of your weapon stats, you can use an extended mag. Also, it's worth knowing that if you're planning to stick to a normal mag, majority of guns offer something called a polymer mag, which allows you to have way more handling. But really beyond that, it's just up to what you want out of your gun build. Next we have the patches. Patches are really just an extension of offsetting your weapon stats. Apart from range and damage, you have patches for every stat. Since I've already explained how to offset stats in this video and what it means, using your weapons patches should be fairly self-explanatory. Also, if your handling is really low and you're looking at ways to increase it, the best things you can do is use a laser sight. Using a laser sight allows you to use the tactical stance, which can be configured in your keybinds. A popular bind is usually the left alt, but I use scroll wheel up. What tactical stance allows you to do is essentially replace your aiming down sights with a zoom that's sort of like halfway in between hip firing and aiming down sights. And in short range engagements is really accurate. And irrespective of your handling stat, you'll be able to use tactical stance zoom really quickly. And for the placement of your laser sight, I recommend you either put it on your right rail. You can't put a laser sight there, or you want to put a patch on your right rail, then you can use a tactical riser, which is in your optics. And finally, your optic. Your choice of optic is entirely preference, but I will give a few quick pointers. If you're using an AR or an SMG, I would stick to the low zoom sights. You can use an ACOG if you really want to, but I wouldn't go too high on the zoom. And I think the panoramic red dot is easily the best low zoom sight. Also, please stop putting 6 times on your SMGs. Now that we've built our gun, it's time to calibrate it. We can think of calibrations as like fine-tuning our gun, and it isn't as complicated as it looks. In essence, all it really is trading one stat for another, and the difference it makes is huge. This is what the gun's like without calibrating it, and then this is how the gun handles after applying calibrations. As you can see, we're able to calibrate 5 of our attachments, being our barrel, foregrip, rear grip, stock, and optic. Now each individual attachment is going to have its own set of calibrations that's unique to itself. The calibrations on the barrel and the optic stay pretty consistent, so I'll quickly go over those. For your optics, you can calibrate your zoom. This is how you get true 1 times if you're using a red dot sight. The default zoom on a red dot sight is 1.25, and if you drag your slider all the way to the end, you can get it down to 1 times. Pupil distance doesn't really make much of a difference, but I always tend to put it to the back. Barrel lets you choose between muzzle velocity and ADS speed, and firing stability for ADS movement speed. If you want to know what stats are being affected when you calibrate your gun, just look over here and you can see the calibration stats. Now, as with other attachments, I'm a fan of maxing out all the calibrations on this one. I think your muzzle velocity and your firing stability are infinitely more important than your ADS and movement speed, because if you remember, we can offset low handling really easily, and there's absolutely no way of offsetting your muzzle velocity. But really, how you handle your calibrations is totally up to you. I would suggest messing around with it, try the minimum settings, try the maximum, see what you can make work and see if anything's really good for your build. But again, for me personally, I prefer to max everything out. I just want to be able to squeeze the most stability and control out of my gun as I possibly can. And with calibrations out of the way, I'm going to leave you with some blueprints to make certain gun builds.